Hi, Greg Perry, the historic preservationist. Anyone up for tea? Um, Today's episode, we're going to be talking about a supper table, a Georgian supper table. This is a George III, about 1767, and it's in mahogany. So, supper tables such as these were interesting because they were very supplemental to the dining experience in England. So this is like a pie crust table. It'll actually tilt up when not in use, go against the wall, and display its beauty of carving. But when, particularly in somebody's boudoir, and you're in my boudoir right now, the bedroom, and for the larger bedrooms, um, people ate there, people conversed, people played cards, games, and they would set up gaming tables. And this is a supper table. So the supper table could have been used for more or less appetizers and delights like that, and even high teas were used in the when this table was used. Uh, the amazing thing about this, it's one piece of mahogany. This is 38 inches wide, one piece of mahogany. Could have been either Cuban or Brazilian mahogany, Honduran mahogany. I mean, it's just mind-boggling, the piece of material. And what's even more mind-boggling is this piece was carved in 8 dished out sections, so you can accommodate 8 individuals. Some have 6, some have 10, but this is a nice size, particularly for the ambiance of this room. So we have 8 dish outs for plates or for teacups, as we have the tea serving here today, or we're emulating with one. So let's talk about the table in a little more depth, though. So these areas were dished out, and you have a center area. So you would have had a possible selection with like a small try or two-tier dumbwaiter with a brass handle that could have had biscotti, biscuits, anything of that nature on there. And you would have had, obviously, if you had enough money and enough clout and to have this table made for you in the 18th century, you would have had a waiter coming. And we would have been served how many people would have been at the table here. So this table is a little bit interesting, and we'll do that at the end of the midsection of the video. Let's say that we'll look at the actual carvings, but let's look at some of the accoutrements on the table here. At a later date, we'll talk about a full tea service for a high tea, and that'll be set up with all 8 positions. Right now, there's tea caddies, and I produced these about 25 years ago. I was so enamored by them in auctions, but they would come up so infrequently. So we have a pair here in curled maple. It has a lock, and you have to remember that tea was such a fever pitch in the late 18th, early 19th century. The tea was the hottest commodity. It used to be alcohol. The turn of the 18th century, from the 17th to the 18th, alcohol was the hottest commodity to be stolen. So if you were in a local tavern, that's why the cage bar came about, because alcohol was the thing. It was the drug of the day. Tea was the next thing to come 100 years later, to be highly prized, so that it was highly, had to be locked up in the evening or people would steal it. So the waiter would come in. He would have the keys for all these tea caddies. He would open this. The lid would go back, and you would choose which tea. These would have been one separate entity opening inside, which would have held one type of loose tea. Okay, so here we have a pear in tiger maple, with a maple stem, and we have an apple, and that's in cherry with a maple stem. And again, single for loose tea. So we on this table, this party, we could accommodate 2 loose teas, and preferably in here, this is a typical 18th century tea caddy. Uh, this one would have had actually 4 glass containers with glass lids. And you can see the top is lined, and sometimes they're lined with velvet or silver. And this one is lined. And you would have had 4 containers to choose from, actually small bags of like a muslin with the tea inside. So, quote, tea bags could be had in here. And notice everything has a lock, because and this is a beautiful one. This is a true Chippendale one, 1776, or in England, it would be a George III, but this is a Philadelphia tea caddy. And we have a nice escutcheon here, and this is in mahogany. kind of matches, in a way, has a little more patina than the actual supper table. But in this functionality, we're calling it our tea table. And so we're going to look when we're going to do a close up here, and we're going to see that actually they did a series of two different flowers alternating on these inner quadrants, these triangulations here. And in the outer triangulations, we have a cluster of grapes, then cherries, grapes, cherries, all the way around. But the carving is just exquisite. It's the relief is phenomenal. I mean, the the small grapes, I mean, each grape is rounded. Typically, a lot of 18th century carving, when we're doing grapes, these are under an eighth of an inch in diameter. Grapes typically show flats on them from carving marks. These are absolutely spot on, particularly with the leaves and the veins in the leaves. They did a wonderful job. Um, and again, 42 inches diameter, it's quite over the edge. And the amazing thing is, when this was carved, you're relieving all this timber out in these 8 locations in the center. And typically, it's showing the stability of the mahogany, early, primitive, first growth mahogany. The tendency of this table is going to be the top is going to be to want to warp this way because they're relieving all the material, the timber out of the center. But this would have been dried properly, but it's showing you that the old growth mahogany had such cross graining of the cellular structure that it really kept everything tight, and it had to be dried properly. A lot of these components, like the secretary behind me, the clock to my left, the chair, they were done green. And they, clock doors sometimes are twisted or cupped or what have you. But this could not happen. It had to be dried probably for the betterment of a year in a well aerated outside shed of sorts. So tea caddies come in all shape and sizes. We may do another video on a tea caddy. We have some tea caddies that are done in tortoise, and we won't get too much into that, but some could be brown tortoise and red tortoise. And there's a whole variety of these guys in wood, spanning over 100 years because tea remained popular up until, 19 teens. So if you want to learn more about tea, tune into my podcast, and you want to go to Apple Podcast, and you're going to look at Apple Podcast, and you're going to see um, probably about 25 different varieties of podcasts talking about high teas, low teas, attire for teas, how tea got developed, how tea was originally brought to England, where it came from, how people drank tea. So a whole series, and they average about 5 to 10 minutes. So I think it's really informative, the teas. So look into that if you're interested. We'll end this section of looking at the top. So you need China. So the liking of tea, the addiction of tea in the late 18th century led to many things. It led to tables like this, not just this, but it led to actually a tea table. In the next video, we're going to talk about a tea table, which would have been a bit lower, a few inches lower, and more on the rectangular note. But that'll be our next segment. And so this is Royal Dalton, Old Country Roses, which it's absolutely exquisite. I mean, it has the gold trim, and it's actually gold leaf put in before the glaze is put on around the top, and these are all hand painted. So Royal Dalton just does a phenomenal job here. For on a masculinity basis, they're a little bit dainty, but it is what it is. And the Royal Dalton is on the bottom, and this set is from 1961. And the interesting thing about this today, and you just don't. Where do you find these things as far as the China goes for tea? Just yard sales in the county, the adjacent counties. You may find one cup or saucer, but it tells you underneath what it is. So I'm collecting all 1961 tea accoutrements here with Royal Dalton. So that's kind of the first goal. So that's what's happening. And tea caddies can be found at any auction. These do come up at auction at times, 18th century. They become a bit pricey now because the fruit aspect them, and we have Mr. Sweets, which is coming up. Nope, you stay down there, buddy. Um, I don't think we're going to keep Mr. Sweets off, but that's fine. We'll let him do this for the video. These run about 900 to 1800 a piece for these tea caddies. So, okay, buddy, we're going to take you off gently. So let's move on to the base. Okay, continuing on with the base, the tripod base, I just want to explain the components for anyone out there that is not educated in this. So what we do, we have a central column, which is turned on a lathe, and while still on the lathe, these flutes are carved in, and they're carved in with a carving tool. As the column terminates down toward the floor here, there's three female dovetails, sliding dovetails cut into the base of this column. The three legs have the male dovetail portion, and it slides and locks in. So the weight, gravity-driven weight of this table is driving it into the feet in three positions, and it holds it very well. Again, because you're that George III, you have beautiful knees that are draped with almost dripping acanthus leaves. And the carving is really super spot on, just like on the top. And down here at the bottom, you have the typical ball and claw feet with this type of table with three talons, and it's done very well. It's a half flattened ball, typical of something you do find in Philadelphia in the late 18th century. But this table is a London table, and at the bottom here you have a tripod a brace out of metal that's going to hold. And if there's any slippage ever from the wood shrinking 100 years, 50 years from whence this table was made, it's screwed in or nailed in the bottom, and it would hold these legs stable. So it just gives a little more stability. And this piece is just hinged at the bottom, and when not in use, we take everything off and we turn it up toward the wall, and it's an absolutely beautiful display piece. So I'm going to sign off with that and with this. And just remember, check out our podcast, The Historic Preservationist. Some 900, edging on 1,000 now. And all we have two YouTube channels, The Historic Preservationist and The Historic Preservationist. So two YouTube channels with all our videos. And Mr. Sweets is signing out. So thanks everyone for viewing.